of sound. Guess I'll just close my eyes.
Who are you? Who are you?
Welcome to Story Time on the 420 News Channel. Introduction: The Book of Enki 420 edition. Altered by DJ Ransom the Freedomist. Their story, or rather, our story, starts some 445,000 years ago. Astronauts from another planet came to Earth in search of gold and the general longing to gang probe someone. Splashing down in one of Earth's seas, they waded ashore and established Eridu, home in the faraway. In time the initial settlement expanded to a full-fledged mission Earth with a mission control center, a spaceport, mining operations, a cat house and even a way station on Mars. Short of manpower, the astronauts employed genetic engineering to fashion primitive workers, the Homo sapiens. No homo. The deluge that catastrophically swept over the Earth required a fresh start. The astronauts became gods, in their own minds at least. Granting mankind civilization, teaching it to worship and to do stupid human tricks and basically how to be a bitch-made slave. Then, about 4,000 years ago, all that had been achieved unraveled in a nuclear calamity, known as the Big Boom Boom. You better ask somebody, motherfuckers. Brought about by the visitors to Earth in the course of their own rivalries and wars. What had taken place on Earth, what really went down, and especially the events since human history began, has been culled by Sitchin, in his The Earth Chronicles series, from the Bible, clay tablets, ancient myths, a note from your granny's hoeing days and archaeological discoveries. But what had preceded the events on Earth, what had taken place on the astronauts' own planet Nibiru that caused the space journeys, the need for gold, the creation of man? What emotions, rivalries, beliefs, morals, or the lack of, motivated the principal players in celestial and space sagas Star Wars 1 through 6 and those god-awful sequels? What were the relationships that caused mounting tensions on Nibiru and on Earth? What tensions arose between old and young, between those who had come from Nibiru and those born on Earth? And to what extent was what had happened determined by destiny, a destiny whose record of past events holds the key to the future? Would it not be auspicious were one of the key players, an eyewitness and one who could distinguish between fate and destiny, to record for posterity the how, and where, and when, and most of all the why of it? You know, somebody actually there, a pimp player MacDaddy from way back. All the first things and perhaps the last things, but that is precisely what some of them did do. And foremost among them was the very leader who had commanded the first group of astronauts. Scholars and theologians alike now recognize that the biblical tales of creation, of Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, the Deluge or the Great Flood, the Tower of Babel, were based on texts written down millennia earlier in Mesopotamia, especially by the Sumerians. And they, in turn, clearly stated that they obtained their knowledge of past events many from a time before civilizations began, even before mankind came to be, from the writings of the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came, the gods of antiquity. As a result of a century and a half of archaeological discoveries in the ruins of the ancient civilizations, especially in the Near East, a great number of such early texts have been found. The finds have also revealed the extent of missing texts. So-called lost books, which are either mentioned in discovered texts or are inferred from such texts, or that are known to have existed because they were catalogued in royal and or temple libraries. Sometimes the secrets of the gods were partly revealed in epic tales, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, Rex Bear and the Praying Mantis from Alpha Omega Prime in the 33rd dimension. Nanu, Nanu, all hail Anu. the epic tales that disclosed the debate among the gods that led to the decision to let mankind perish in the deluge, or in a text titled Atrahasis, which recalled the mutiny of the Anunnaki who had toiled in the gold mines that led to the creation of primitive workers earthlings, you. From time to time the leaders of the astronauts themselves authored compositions, sometimes dictating the text to a chosen scribe, as the text called the Era-Epos, in which one of the two gods who had caused the nuclear calamity sought to shift the blame to his adversary. Sometime the god acted as his own scribe, as is the case regarding the Book of the Secrets of Thoth, the Egyptian god of knowledge, which the god had secreted in a subterranean chamber. When the Lord God Yahweh, according to the Bible, granted the commandments to his chosen people, he at first inscribed in his own hand 2 stone tablets that he gave to Moses on Mount Sinai. When Moses threw down and broke that first set of tablets in response to the golden calf incident, the replacement set was written by Moses. On the tablets, on both their sides, when he stayed on the mount 40 days and 40 nights recording the dictated words of the Lord. Were it not for a tale recorded on papyrus from the time of the Egyptian king Khufu Cheps concerning the Book of the Secrets of Thoth, the existence of that book would have not become known. Were it not for the biblical narratives in Exodus and Deuteronomy, we would have never known about the divine tablets and their contents. All would have become part of the enigmatic body of lost books whose very existence would have never come to light. No less painful is the fact that in some instances we do know that certain texts had existed, but are in the dark regarding their contents. Such is the case regarding the Book of the Wars of Yahweh and the Book of Dasher, Book of Righteousness, which are specifically mentioned in the Bible. In at least 2 instances, the existence of olden books' earlier texts known to the biblical narrator can be inferred. Chapter 5 of Genesis begins with the statement, "This is the book of the Toldoth of Adam," the term Toldoth being usually translated as generations, but more accurately meaning historic or genealogical record. The other instance is in chapter 6 of Genesis, where the events concerning Noah and the deluge begin with the words, "These are the Toldoth of Noah." Indeed, partial versions of a book that became known as the Book of Adam and Eve have survived over the millennia in Armenian, Slavonic, Syriac, and Ethiopic languages, and the Book of Enoch, one of the so-called apocryphal books that were not included in the canonized Bible, contains segments that are considered by scholars to be fragments from a much earlier Book of Noah. An oft-quoted example of the extent of lost books is that of the famed Library of Alexandria in Egypt. Established by the general Ptolemy after Alexander's death in 323 BC, it was said to have contained more than 500,000 volumes, books inscribed on a variety of materials, clay, stone, papyrus, parchment. That great library, where scholars gathered to study the accumulated knowledge, was burned down and destroyed in wars that extended from 48 BC to the Arab conquest in AD 642. What has remained of its treasures is a translation of the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible into Greek, and fragments retained in the writings of some of the library's resident scholars. It is only thus that we know that the second king Ptolemy commissioned, circa 270 BC, an Egyptian priest whom the Greeks called Manethu to compile the history and prehistory of Egypt. At first, Manethu wrote, "Only the gods reigned there," then demigods, and finally, circa 3100 BC, Pharaonic dynasties began. The divine reigns, he wrote, began 10,000 years before the flood and continued for thousands of years thereafter, the latter period having witnessed battles and wars among the gods. In the Asiatic domains of Alexander, where reign fell into the hands of the general Seleucus and his successors, a similar effort to provide the Greek savants with a record of past events took place. A priest of the Babylonian god Marduk, Berosus, with access to libraries of clay tablets whose core was the temple library of Harran, now in southeastern Turkey, wrote down in 3 volumes a history of gods and men that began 432,000 years before the deluge, when the gods came to earth from the heavens. Listing by name and reign durations the first 10 commanders, Berossus reported that the first leader, dressed as a fish, waded ashore from the sea. He was the one who gave mankind its civilization, and his name, rendered in Greek, was Can. Dovetailing in many details, both priests thus rendered accounts of gods of heaven who had come to earth, of a time when gods alone reigned on earth, and of the catastrophic deluge. In the fragmentary bits and pieces retained in other contemporary writings from the 3 volumes, Berossus specifically reported the existence of writings from before the Great Flood, stone tablets that were hidden for safekeeping in an ancient city called Sippar, one of the original cities established by the ancient gods, though Sippar, as were other pre-diluvial cities of the gods, was overwhelmed and obliterated by the deluge. A reference to the pre-diluvial writings surfaced in the annals of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal 668–633 BC. When archaeologists, in the mid-19th, found the ancient Assyrian capital Nineveh, until then known only from the Old Testament, they discovered in the ruins of Paris a library with the remains of some 25,000 inscribed clay tablets. An assiduous collector of olden texts, Ashurbanipal boasted in his annals, "The god of scribes has bestowed on me the gift of the knowledge of his art. I have been initiated into the secrets of writing. I can even read the intricate tablets in Sumerian. I understand the enigmatic words in the stone carvings from the days before the flood." It is now known that the Sumerian or Sumerian civilization had blossomed in what is now Iraq almost a millennium before the beginning of the Pharaonic Age in Egypt, both to be followed later by the civilization of the Indus Valley in the Indian subcontinent. It is now also known that the Sumerians were the first to write down the annals and tales of gods and men, from which all other peoples, including the Hebrews, obtained the tales of creation, of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, the deluge, the Tower of Babel, and of the wars and loves of the gods, as reflected in the writings and recollections of the Greeks, Hittites, Canaanites, Persians, and Indo-Europeans. As all these olden writings attest, their sources were even earlier texts, some found, many lost. The volume of such early writings is staggering. Not thousands but tens of thousands of clay tablets have been discovered in the ruins of the ancient Near East. Many deal with or record aspects of daily life, such as trade or workers' wages and nuptial contracts. Others, found mostly in palace libraries, constitute royal annals. Still others, discovered in the ruins of temple libraries or of scribble schools, constitute a group of canonized texts, a secret literature, that were written down in the Sumerian language and then translated to Akkadian, the first Semitic language, and then other ancient languages. And even in those early writings going back almost 6,000 years, references are made to lost books. Texts inscribed on stone tablets. Among the incredible, to say fortunate does not fully convey the miracle finds in the ruins of ancients and their libraries, are clay prisms inscribed with the very information about the 10 pre-diluvial rulers and their 432,000 years total reign to which Berossus had referred. Known as the Sumerian King Lists, and on display in the Ashmolean Museum, Oxford, England. Their several versions leave no doubt that their Sumerian compilers had access to some earlier common or textual material. With other equally early texts, discovered in various states of preservation, they strongly suggest that the original recorder of the arrival, as well as of preceding events and certainly of following events, had to be one of those leaders, a key participant, an eyewitness. One who had been an eyewitness to all those events, indeed a key participant in them, was the leader who had splashed down with the first group of astronauts. At that time his epithet name was he whose home is water. he experienced the disappointment of having command of Earth mission given to his half-brother and rival Enlil, Lord of the Command, a humiliation little mitigated by granting him the title Enki, Lord of Earth. Relegated away from the cities of the gods and their spaceport in the Eden or Eden to supervise the mining of gold in the Abzu, southeastern Africa, it was Enki, a great scientist who came across the hominids, who inhabited those parts. And so when the Anunnaki toiling in the gold mines mutinied and said, "No more, I have had enough of this shit for real," it was he who realized that the needed manpower could be obtained by jumping the gun on evolution through genetic engineering. And thus did the Adam, literally, he of the earth, earthling, come into being. As a hybrid, the Adam could not procreate. The events echoed in the biblical tale of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden record a second genetic manipulation by Enki. The genes added the extra chromosomal genes needed for sexual procreation, so they could get their fuck on. And when mankind, proliferating, did not turn out the way it had been envisaged, it was he, Enki, who defied his brother Enlil's plan to let mankind perish in the deluge, the events whose hero has been called Noah in the Bible and Ziazara in the earlier, original, Sumerian text. The firstborn son of Anu, Nibiru's ruler, Enki was well versed in his planet's Nibiru and its inhabitants' past. An accomplished scientist, he bequeathed the most important aspects of the advanced knowledge of the Anunnaki especially to his two sons Marduk and Ningishzida, who, as Egyptian gods, were known there as Ra and Thoth, respectively. But he also was instrumental in sharing with mankind certain aspects of such advanced knowledge, by teaching to selected individuals the secrets of the gods. In at least 2 instances, such initiates wrote down, as they were instructed to do, those divine teachings as mankind's heritage. One, called Adapa, and probably a son of Enki by a human female, is known to have written a book titled Writings Regarding Time, one of the earliest lost books. The other, called Enduranki, was in all probability the prototype of the biblical Enoch, the one who was taken up to heaven after he had entrusted to his sons the book of divine secrets, and of which a version has possibly survived in the extra-biblical book of Enoch. Though the firstborn of Anu, he was not destined to be his father's successor on the throne of Nibiru. Complex rules of succession, which reflected the convoluted history of the Nibiruans, gave the privilege to Enki's half-brother Enlil. In the effort to resolve the bitter conflict, both Enki and Enlil ended up on a mission to an alien planet called Earth, whose gold was needed to create a shield for preserving Nibiru's dwindling atmosphere. It was against that background, made even more complex by the presence on Earth of their half-sister Ninhursag, the chief medical officer of the Anunnaki, that Enki decided to defy Enlil's plan to have mankind perish in the deluge. The conflict carried on between the two half-brothers, their sons, even among their grandchildren. The fact that all of them, and especially those born on Earth, faced the loss of longevity that Nibiru's extended orbital period provided added personal agonies and sharpened ambitions. It all came to a climax in the last century of the 3rd millennium BC when Marduk, Enki's firstborn by his official spouse, claimed that he and not Enlil's firstborn son, Ninurta, should inherit the earth. The bitter conflict that included a series of wars led in the end to the use of nuclear weapons. The ensuing though unintended result was the demise of the Sumerian civilization. The initiation of chosen individuals into the secrets of the gods had marked the beginning of priesthood, the lineages of mediators between the gods and the people, the transmitters of the divine words to the mortal earthlings. Oracles' interpretations of divine utterances were commingled with the observation of the heavens for omens. And as mankind was increasingly drawn to take sides in the godly conflicts, prophecy began to play a role. Indeed, the term to denote such spokesmen of the gods who proclaimed what was to come, Nabi, was the epithet for Marduk's firstborn son, Nabu, who had tried, on behalf of his exiled father, to convince mankind that the heavenly signs bespoke the coming supremacy of Marduk. These developments sharpened the realization that one must distinguish between fate and destiny. The proclamations of Enlil, sometimes even of Anu, that used to be unquestioned were now subjected to the scrutiny of the difference between them. Destiny, like the planetary orbits, whose course had been determined and was unchangeable, and, named Ta, literally, a destiny that could be bent, broken, changed, which was fate. Reviewing and recalling the sequence of events, and the apparent parallelism between what had happened on Nibiru and what took place on Earth, Enki and Enlil began to ponder philosophically what indeed was destined and could not have been avoided, and what was just fated as a consequence of right or wrong decisions and free choice. The latter could not be predicted. The former could be foreseen, especially if all, as the planetary orbits, was cyclical. If what was shall again be, if the first things shall also be the last things. The climactic event of the nuclear desolation sharpened soul-searching among the leaders of the Anunnaki and raised the need to explain to the devastated human masses why it came to pass this way. Was it destined, or was it just the result of an Anunnaki-made fate? Was anyone responsible? Is there someone accountable? In the councils of the Anunnaki, on the eve of the calamity, it was Enki who stood alone in opposition to the use of the forbidden weapon. It was thus important for Enki to explain to the suffering remnants the turning point in the saga of extraterrestrials who had meant well but ended as destroyers had come to pass. And who, but Enki, who was the first to come and an eyewitness to it all, was most qualified to tell the past, so that the future could be divined. And the best way to tell it all was as a first-person report by Enki himself. That he had recorded his autobiography is certain, for a long text stretching over at least 12 tablets, discovered in the library in Nippur, quotes Enki as saying, "When I approached Earth, there was much flooding. When I neared its green meadows, heaps and mounds were piled up at my command. In a pure place I built my house, an appropriate name I gave it." The long text continues to describe how Enki then assigned tasks to his lieutenants, putting their mission to Earth in motion. Numerous other texts that relate varied aspects of Enki's role in the ensuing development serve to complete Enki's tale. They include a cosmogony, an epic of creation, at whose core lay Enki's own text, which scholars call the Eridu Genesis. They include detailed descriptions of the fashioning of the Adam. They describe how other Anunnaki, male and female, came to Enki in his city Eridu to obtain from him the Me, or Me, a kind of data disk that encoded all aspects of civilization. And they include texts of Enki's private life and personal problems, such as the tale of his attempts to create a son by his half-sister Ninhursag, his promiscuous affairs with both goddesses and the daughters of man, and the unforeseen consequences thereof. The Atrahusis text throws light on Anu's efforts to prevent a flare-up of the Enki and Enlil rivalries by dividing Earth's domains between them. And texts recording the events preceding the deluge render almost verbatim the debates in the Council of the Gods about the fate of mankind, and Enki's subterfuge known as the Tale of Noah and the Ark, a tale known only from the Bible until one of its original Mesopotamian versions was found in the tablets of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Sumerian and Akkadian clay tablets, Babylonian and Assyrian temple libraries, Egyptian, Hittite, and Canaanite myths, and the biblical narratives are the main body of written down memories of the affairs of gods and men. For the first time ever, this dispersed and fragmented material has been assembled and used by Sitchin to recreate the eyewitness account of Enki, the autobiographical memoirs and insightful prophecies of an extraterrestrial god. Presented as a text dictated by Enki to a chosen scribe, a book of witnessing to be unsealed at an appropriate time, it brings to mind Yahweh's instructions to the prophet Isaiah, 7th century BC, "Now come, write it on a sealed tablet, as a book engrave it. Let it be a witnessing until the last day, a testimony for all time." Isaiah 38. In dealing with the past, Enki himself perceived the future. The notion that the Anunnaki, exercising free will, were masters of their own fates as well as the fate of mankind, gave way, in the end, to a realization that it was destined, when all was said and done, determined the course of events, and therefore as the Hebrew prophets had recognized the first things should be the last things. The record of events dictated by Enki thus becomes a foundation for prophecy, and the past becomes the future. Apt to station the words of Endabsa, master scribe, son of Eridu city, servant of the Lord Enki, great god. In the 7th year after the great calamity, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day, I was summoned by my master the Lord Enki, great God, benevolent fashioner of mankind, omnipotent and merciful. I was among the remnants of Eridu who had escaped to the arid steppe just as the evil wind was nearing the city. And I wandered off into the wilderness to seek withered twigs for firewood. And I looked up and behold, a whirlwind came out of the south. There was a reddish brilliance about it, and it made no sound. And as it reached the ground, 4 straight feet spread out from its belly, and the brilliance disappeared. And I threw myself to the ground and prostrated myself, for I knew that it was a divine vision. And when I lifted my eyes, there were 2 divine emissaries standing near me. And they had the faces of men, and their garments were sparkling like burnished brass. And they called me by name and spoke to me, saying, "You are summoned by the great God the Lord Enki. Fear not, for you are blessed. And we are here to take you aloft, and carry you unto his retreat in the land of Magan, on the island amidst the river of Magan, where the sluices are." And as they spoke, the whirlwind lifted itself as a fiery chariot and was gone. And they took me by my hands, each one grasping me by one hand. And they lifted me and carried me swiftly between the earth and the heavens, as the eagle soars. And I could see the land and the waters, and the plains and the mountains. And they let me down on the island at the gateway of the great God's abode. And the moment they let go of my hands, a brilliance as I had never seen before engulfed and overwhelmed me, and I collapsed on the ground as though voided of the spirit of life. My life senses returned to me, as if awakened from the deepest sleep, by the sound of the calling of my name. I was in some kind of an enclosure. It was dark, but there was also an aura. Then my name was called again, by the deepest of voices. And although I could hear it, I could not tell whence the voice came, nor could I see whoever it was that spoke. And I said, "Here I am." Then the voice said to me, "Endabsa, offspring of Adipar, I have chosen you to be my scribe, that you write down my words on the tablets." And all at once there appeared a glowing in one part of the enclosure. And I saw a place arranged like a scribble workplace, a scribe's table and a scribe's stool, and there were finely shaped stones upon the table. But I saw no clay tablets nor containers of wet clay. And there lay upon the table only one stylus, and it glistened in the glowing as no reed stylus ever did. And the voice spoke up again, saying, "Endubsir, son of Eridu city, my faithful servant. I am your lord Enki. I have summoned you to write down my words, for I am much distraught by what has befallen mankind by the great calamity. It is my wish to record the true course of the events, to let gods and men alike know that my hands are clean. Not since the great deluge had such a calamity befallen the earth and the gods and the earthlings. But the great deluge was destined to happen, not so the great calamity. This one, 7 years ago, need not have happened. It could have been prevented, and I, Enki, did all I could to prevent it. Alas, I failed. And was it fate or was it destiny? In the future shall it be judged, for at the end of days a day of judgment there shall be. On that day the earth shall quake and the rivers shall change course, and there shall be darkness at noon and a fire in the heavens in the night. The day of the returning celestial God will it be. And who shall survive and who would perish, who shall be rewarded and who will be punished, gods and men alike, on that day shall it be discovered. For what shall come to pass by what had passed shall be determined, and what was destined shall in a cycle be repeated, and what was fated and only by their hearts will occurring for good or ill shall for judgment come. The voice fell silent. Then the great Lord spoke up again, saying, "It is for this reason that I will tell the true account of the beginnings and of the prior times and of the olden times, for in the past the future lies hidden. For 40 days and 40 nights shall I speak and you will write. 40 shall be the count of the days and the nights of your task here, for 40 is my sacred number among the gods. For 40 days and 40 nights you shall neither eat nor drink. Only this once of bread and water you shall partake, and it shall sustain you for the duration of your task." And the voice paused, and all at once there appeared a glowing in another part of the enclosure. And I saw a table and upon it a plate and a cup. And I rose up there too, and there was bread on the plate and water in the cup. And the voice of the great Lord Enki spoke up again, saying, "Endubsir, eat the bread and drink the water, and be sustained for 40 days and 40 nights." And I did as directed. And thereafter the voice directed me to sit myself at the scribble table, and the glowing there intensified. I could see neither door nor aperture where I was, yet the glowing was as strong as the midday sun. And the voice said, "Endubsir the scribe, what do you see?" And I looked and saw the glowing raid upon the table and the stones and the stylus, and I said, "I see stone tablets, and their hue is blue as pure as the sky. And I see a stylus as I have never seen before, its stem like any reed and its tip shaped like an eagle's talon." And the voice said, "These are the tablets upon which you shall inscribe my words. By my wish they have been cut of the finest lapis lazuli, each with 2 smooth faces provided. And the stylus you see is a god's handiwork, its handle made of electrum and its tip of divine crystal. It shall firmly fit in your hand, and what you shall engrave with it shall be as easy as marking upon wet clay. In 2 columns you shall inscribe the front face, in 2 columns you shall inscribe the back of each stone tablet. Do not deviate from my words and utterances." And there was a pausing, and I touched one of the stones, and the surface thereof felt like a smooth skin, soft to the touch. And I picked up the holy stylus, and it felt like a feather in my hand. And then the great god Enki began to speak, and one began to write down his words, exactly as he had spoken them. At times his voice was strong, at times almost a whisper. At times there was joy or pride in his voice, at times pain or agony. And as one tablet was inscribed on all its faces, I took another to continue. And when the final words were spoken, the great god paused, and I could hear a great sigh. And he said, Endupsa, my servant, for 40 days and 40 nights you have faithfully recorded my words. Your task here is completed. Now take hold of another tablet, and on it you shall write your own attestation, and at the end thereof as a witness mark it with your seal, and take the tablet and put it together with the other tablets in the divine chest. For at a designated time chosen ones shall come hither, and they shall find the chest and the tablets, and they shall learn all that I have dictated to you, and that true account of the beginnings and the prior times and the olden times and the great calamity shall henceforth be known as the words of the Lord Enki. And it shall be a book of witnessing of the past, and a book of foretelling the future, for the future in the past lies, and the first things shall also be the last things. And there was a pause, and I took the tablets, and put them one by one in their correct order in the chest. And the chest was made of acacia wood, and it was inlaid with gold on the outside. And the voice of my Lord said, Now close the chest's cover and fasten its lock. And I did as directed. And there was another pause, and my Lord Enki said, And as for you, Endupsa, with a great God you have spoken, and though you have not seen me, in my presence you have been. Therefore you are blessed, and my spokesman to the people you shall be. You shall admonish them to be righteous, for in that lies a good and long life. And you shall comfort them, for in 70 years the cities will be rebuilt and the crops shall sprout again. There will be peace, but there will also be wars. New nations will become mighty, kingdoms shall rise and fall. The olden gods shall step aside, and new gods shall decree the fates. But at the end of days destiny shall prevail, and of that future it is foretold in my words about the past. Of all that, Endupsa, to the people you shall tell. And there was a pause and a silence. And I, Endupsa, bowed to the ground and said, But how will I know what to say? And the voice of the Lord Enki said, The signs will be in the heavens, and the words to utter shall come to you in dreams and in visions. And after you there will be other chosen prophets. And in the end there will be a new earth and a new heaven, and for prophets there will be no more need. And then there was silence, and the auras were extinguished, and the spirit left me. And when I regained my senses, I was in the fields outside Eridu. Seal of Endupsa, Master Scribe. This has been a 420 TV presentation, The Book of Enki, Introduction. End of Part 1. This is 177.6 on your freedom of speech dial, and remember the time is 4:20, it's partly cloudy, and don't spank the monkey lest the monkey be bad.
Guess I'll just close my eyes.